Okay, welcome. Okay, we're about to get started here, guys. Welcome. If you're on TikTok, welcome in, tap the screen, share the live. Um, and if you're on Facebook, type in hashtag live if you're watching live, hashtag replay if you're watching the replay. Got some really good topics to go over tonight. If this is your first time joining, my name is Tina. I am a happiness coach. I help people go from being in a dark place to feeling happier in their lives, whether that's personal, professional, relationships. Okay. And I do this by sharing my experience, strength, and hope. And sometimes I will talk about business related topics. Sometimes it'll be more personal. Sometimes it'll be more relationship wise. But whatever it is, I hope that you find something useful, because these are tools that I actually use in my day-to-day life to help me get to a happier state. So tonight we are going to be talking about being defensive and dealing with defensive behaviors, and where that stems into a trauma response and how you can deal with that. So, have you ever been told yourself that you're defensive? Yes, I definitely have. And I'm guilty of being defensive a lot of times, even when people aren't trying to. Um, and so, yes, people that are going to be being weird and difficult, I don't need you on the chat. And I will be defensive and I'm going to block you. So I'm not completely healed, but I'm working on it. All right. So, have you ever felt like people are super critical of you, to the point that you feel maybe that you've been picked on in a certain situation, whether it's in a friendship, whether it's in family, whether it's in the work environment? Okay, we're going to cover that. We're going to cover, like, have you ever worked with someone or been tried to address something with someone and all they do is just get defensive and blow up and you just can't talk to them? What do you do in those situations? So, like I said, this is stuff that we're going to talk about tonight. We're going to go over some of these and we're going to dive deep into the situation, understanding where it stems from, why it's happening, and how to deal with it in a way that is productive for you and the other person, so that you have a happy, harmonious outcome from the situation. Okay. And I'm often going to look down at my notes because I wanted to make sure that I keep on track, because if not, I will just veer off into other topics. So, right. So, when you have, before we get into that, I was told a quote a long time ago, and it's one of my favorites, and I've always been told if you use something more than 3 times, then it's yours. So this quote that somebody had always said was, you can either be right or you can be happy, but you can't be both. So a lot of times we end up fighting and arguing over stuff that we really want to be right about, and it ends up causing us to be very unhappy, rather than deciding to just let some things go. We have to choose our battles, right? The problem is when you've grown up in an abusive environment where there was a lot of criticism or abuse and stuff like that, you start to become conditioned to not know what is valid criticism and what's invalid. So you end up having a couple of different responses to it. So if you are blamed for things that were not your fault, and you try to logically argue back as to why that wasn't your fault, why you didn't do it, maybe you got blamed for something a sibling did, and you were always the scapegoat in the family. Every time you try to argue, it fell on deaf ears. So you end up feeling invalidated. So then anytime somebody tries to give you any kind of feedback, even if they're doing it in a constructive way, it triggers this attack response within you, and you go into fight or flight, and then you get defensive, so you're ready to fight back. And this happened a lot in my childhood, where I was often criticized. It's like I brought home a report card, I got 100% in math and I got 100% in French. The other marks were like in the high 80s, 90s, and except for phys ed. that one was a little bit more of a C. But I got told, when are the rest going to be at 100%? My brother went from a D to a C in most of his marks, and they threw him a party, took him out for dinner, bought him a bike. He got rewarded heavily for slight improvements. I got criticized heavily for not being perfect. So I developed this thought process of anything less than an 80 is a fail. And it was devastating, because I knew if it wasn't at least an 80, I was going to be heavily criticized. I was going to be assigned chores. I was not going to be allowed to. It would be leveraged as weapons as to why I wasn't allowed to do certain things. Anything that was fun, I would be punished with household chores and cleaning and doing all this kind of stuff. And so, needless to say, I developed some skills, some coping mechanisms of being able to argue and document and say, well, no, these are the things I actually did, because it didn't. The problem with growing up in an abusive environment like that is that it's not logical. It is not meant to be logical, and whatever you say is going to be turned around against you. So this particular narcissistic abuser that we had for the longest period, he was really, really good at that, and then would flip things around. So it created this sense of anxiety of that I had to perform at certain levels at all times, and any slight mistakes, nobody was harder on me than me, right? For some reason this is coming to mind. So when we were being taught cursive writing, I don't even know if they teach that anymore. We were learning how to join the letters together, and for some reason the letter D, I could not figure out how to join the letters together. And I remember having a complete meltdown in class because I couldn't do this. And to this day, I still don't, if I'm writing cursive, I don't connect the D. So I don't know, there's some sort of block there, but that was one of the things. It's like, I was highly criticized of certain things that I could or couldn't do, and nobody was able to understand or explain. And so then I got labeled as reactive, and so then I learned to hide my feelings and all of these different coping mechanisms. So when somebody would bring something up, because I was so careful on the front end to make sure that everything was as perfect as possible so that I wouldn't get criticized, that when I did get criticized, it felt like a complete and utter failure. And so I became really sensitive with that kind of stuff. And because I would come back with saying, no, I've checked all these things, on one hand, in the work environment, it actually helped me a lot, because I was very vigilant about making sure things were as accurate as possible. But on the flip side, I'd also be devastated when I made the slightest mistake. So it made me a little bit temperamental to deal with. And I think it's always a good sign in your healing process, your healing journey, if you are able to get to the point where you can look at your own behavior and you can laugh at yourself and kind of go, oh man, I was a handful. And all it takes is getting a taste of your own medicine. So, and being able to see that there's a different way to handle it, so that even when you were, because as I became a supervisor and I became a manager and I started doing all these things, and I had to give critical feedback to people, of course, because I'm sensitive, I was super sensitive at how I delivered that information. And a lot of times, even with the best of intentions, most positive, people still got defensive, they still got their back up, and they were not receptive to whatever feedback was being given. They felt attacked, they felt picked on, they felt that I was being unfair. So knowing what's going on here is really key at being able to deal with this in an effective way. And doing the inner work really helps, because the more you can do your own inner work and understand why you behave in those particular ways, is important for being able to understand why other people are behaving in those certain ways. And to know that when somebody is being defensive and it seems like an extreme reaction for the thing that's going on with what you're trying to tell them, it's an 80-20 rule. So 20% is the event that's happening today. The other 80% is something from their past. So that could be a past work environment that they've been in where they were harshly criticized for not getting things right. Maybe they were punished. They were humiliated publicly, those kind of things. Something like that, shame, blame, all of those kind of negative, low vibration kind of tactics that happen. Maybe they got blamed for something that they didn't even do and they weren't able to defend themselves. So now you've got the injustice added on top of that too. And if they already had those kind of wounds from the past, which I did, it makes them extra sensitive, right? So there's two ways that people end up dealing with this. They either start becoming, people-pleasing, perfectionist type, trying to go over and above and beyond kind of thing. Oh, hi, Peter. Thank you so much for the roses. I appreciate you. Aw. Always helping hit that goal. Nice. Thank you. So you can end up developing some really rigid perceptions, and you get a little bit jaded too. So it's kind of like what ends up happening is so criticism and gaslighting, those are basically fear tactics, and they're meant to disorient you and make you not really understand what's real anymore. So you question yourself. So it's to keep you off balance. The point is to keep you off balance. It's not about truth. It's not about logic. It's not about anything like that. The whole point is to keep you emotionally off balance, guessing what the hell is going on, and that whatever it is, the only thing that you are sure of is it's your fault. And that creates a lot of anxiety, will cause you to be defensive, cause you to have to put up this armor and not receive anything, because you're always prepared for this attack. So you become jaded, you become rigid in your perception. Maybe you've got very certain processes that you will not deviate from, because you know if you deviate from that process, you're going to miss a step, and then you're going to get criticized, and then you're going to have to go on the defensive again. And so this is why sometimes when you're dealing with somebody that's overly rigid, they don't want to give up any of that control. They're all fearful, they're aggressive, they're argumentative, they're nitpicky, all of these kind of things. You see these behaviors happening, and I can promise you it's tied into criticism from how they were raised or other environments that they've been in, that they were unfairly, unjustly criticized. Okay? And not like constructive criticism, damaging criticism. There's a big difference. So constructive criticism will always look at how the person feels, what they can do to improve, and it's always buffered with reassurances that they are still a good person, that they're not a horrible person, they just need to make this slight tweak, and then they're going to be on track. It is backed with a belief that comes from whoever's delivering the feedback, that person believes that this other person is fully capable, and that person receiving the feedback feels that. Without that feeling, it's just negative criticism, right? And unless they feel like you have their back, they're not going to fully receive whatever guidance or direction. Now, that doesn't mean that you don't have their back when you give them that feedback. But if they're being reactive to it and it doesn't make sense, especially when you're being as constructive as you can be and supportive as you can be in the situation, know that it's not you. So knowing when it's you and when it's something that's going on with them. So if you see it's something going on with them, you've tried to cover everything on your side and they're still reactive, then you know that there's something else going on. So now, whether you like it or not, you have to pay the price for somebody else's crime. Okay? So that's the best way I can describe it. You didn't cause the trauma, you didn't deal it to them, yet you still have to deal with this. You are still having to deal with the fallout of somebody else's bad behavior, whatever it was, whether it's from their childhood, their previous work environment, previous relationship, whatever. But if you are in the position of being the one who is more self-aware, has done more inner work, then it should be fairly easy for you to extend that offer of love, of kindness, of support to that other person, because you've already done the inner work. You're already strong enough to be able to support them. If you're not, then we're going to talk about what happens there, because oftentimes when we haven't done particular inner work, and I'm going to share a story about a time that I didn't handle things so well, we go on the offensive, and that is never good in a leadership position. Okay, so yeah, we have to remember. Oh, yes, I know what I was going to talk about here. So when I was talking about when you are dealing with fear, what ends up happening is, and the criticisms, is that what happens over time is people start to become desensitized to the criticisms. And then they don't take that feedback, and then it ends up having to escalate more and more before they even pay attention to the situation. So sometimes when you're trying to give feedback for something, to get somebody back on track, or to say, hey, this isn't good the way it is, this doesn't work for me, sorry, people, they don't seem to take it seriously. It's kind of like kids where the mom she yells at the kids and they don't do anything, or she'll ask them to do something and they don't do it, and it's not until she absolutely loses her shit, then they look at her and go, why are you so angry? And she's like, I've told you like 20 times, you need to do this, right? So it can feel like that. So that's another signal that somebody has been through a lot of criticism, when they just don't even respond to anything that you've tried to tell them. And they, like, it's not important, right? They just dismiss it because they grew up in a home where absolutely everything was criticized. So you just tune it out, because if not, you're in this constant state of fight or flight. You're under constant threat or attack. So you learn to just ignore simple things. And what ends up happening is that nothing gets done until it becomes a big problem. And we talked about this a little bit yesterday, of how some people are firefighters and they don't deal with preventative measures to prevent any fires. They only know how to put out the fire when it happens. But they don't have that energy because they've learned, they've been conditioned not to pay attention to certain things. So anytime you lead from a place of fear, it's like leading from a place of addiction. It gives you a quick fix, but there is a law of diminishing returns. So the more you do that, the more you end up relying on that, and it's so tempting to just like get angry about something, and people start scattering and they do everything that you need, and you're like, oh fuck, thank God, right? It's so easy to default to that kind of mode, but you really have to look at it. That's like leading from an addictive place. okay? The more you do it, the less effective it's going to be, the more you're going to need to do it, and next thing you know, that you're going to end up having to go to some fucking rage or anger management training, because all you know is how to blow up at people, and you don't know how to get them to do what they need to do without fear and intimidation. I had to learn this the hard way because of the environment I grew up in. Fear and intimidation, it worked pretty good. It's a quick fix. It gets shit done. But it has long-term effects, and not good ones. So you want to try to, even though it feels slow, it feels painful, it feels tedious, same thing with, you know, your healing process. You're going to have to go through a little bit of a slower process at first, and it'll build a stronger foundation for you. Okay? And instead of it being, when you're dealing with criticism and giving feedback, it should be a little bit more like a flow, more like a dance. It's a back and forth. There's adjustments that you constantly need to do. It's like, oh, that was a little too hard. Oh, that's a little too soft. And then just trying to find where is that sweet spot of being able to give that feedback and receive it. Okay? So I want you, let's do a little bit of a live exercise here of understanding and paying attention to the signals in your body. So whether you're the one that's being defensive, or you are providing feedback for somebody else and they are reacting defensively. So you can go ahead and close your eyes. And you can imagine a situation where somebody is giving you feedback, they're giving you criticism that you do not feel is fair or warranted. You're upset about this. And I want you to think of, how does your body feel? Okay? Do you have any tension in your head? Are your shoulders tight? Are you sitting all clenched up? Are your fists or your fingers rigid? Like, where's the tension in your body? Do you find that your teeth start to grind? You're biting your tongue? You're just like, oh man, the shit I want to say to you, I cannot say in public, you know, kind of thing. One of those kind of things. Understanding what's going on in your body. It's yeah, tension. Yeah, you can feel it in the heart. Absolutely right, Ryan. That you might feel your heart start to race, and you feel like your blood's starting to boil, and you're ready for that fight kind of thing. You might find that your teeth, you grind your teeth. That was a good signal when I was in a situation where I was constantly angry at work, and what it would end up happening is at night I would sleep and I'd grind my teeth, and I'd wake up, my jaw was like so sore, and it was from the stress of the constant criticism in this particular environment that I was in. Eye rolls, so deep sighs, those kind of things. Or their eye rolls, deep sighs, are like, oh, here they go again, always criticizing. And you have to look at your behavior. Are you always criticizing, or is it, you know, have you been leading with fear? You know, all of those kind of things. You have to understand what's going on, but we're focusing on what's happening in your body, because when you understand what's going on in your body, those are your signals. And when you pay attention, you're actually grounded in your body. That's when you're like, oh shit, my shoulders are really tight. Oh, I've got that shallow breathing again. Oh, my jaw's all clenched. College making me crazy, anxious, gotta get an average of 70 ending of term to get into the program next year. Oh, yeah, that definitely sounds pretty stressful. How far off are you with that, Ryan? Are you pretty close, or are you on the edge? What's going on? Yeah, it can be stressful going through that. Focusing on the stress, though, doesn't help. Focusing on what it is that you need to help get grounded, paying attention to what's going on in your body. So this is actually going to help you. So if you're finding the shallow breathing, you have pins and needles running through your body kind of thing, you have an upset tummy, You have urgent need to run to the bathroom. Urgent need to run to the bathroom is usually a fear response. That's when you're really triggered fear-wise. Think of any animal that you've ever had to take to the vet and they're really afraid and of course they end up peeing themselves kind of thing. That is a fear release, okay? Kids too, that kind of stuff. Most classes are over 70, so you should be good to go, but anxiety is probably lying to me. Yeah. Check out my YouTube channel. I did a training the other day on how to deal with anxiety. There should be some tips in there for you. Check out Coach Tina B 125 and watch that training, okay, Ryan? And shaky legs. So like if you're like fidgeting and stuff like that, twitching, all that kind of stuff, that's a good sign that you are in a fight or flight kind of mode. So being able to, one of the things that I find most helpful, you can do it anywhere, is doing box breathing. Okay, box breathing is you take an inhale for 4 seconds, hold it, 4 or is it 8? 4, I think. Okay, whatever. Take in a deep breath, hold it for 8 seconds, and then let it out for 8 seconds, hold it again for 8 seconds, and then breathe in. 8 or 4. Whichever works for you, try. Yeah, I can't remember right now. I'm having a mental block here. So, but it's box breathing. You do that 3 or 4 times in a row. It helps calm down your nervous system. Another thing that you can try, Ryan, is writing out what it is that you're afraid of. If I don't pass this exam, then this will happen. I don't know enough about this part of the curriculum, and I'm worried that I'm not going to do well on that. Whatever it is that you're writing out, give your fears a voice so that you can externalize it and then deal with it more logically. Because right now, if you're feeling that anxiety of, oh, I'm not going to do well, or I have to do this, then it ends up stressing you out, that you can't think clearly. Not being able to breathe properly will, it keeps you in a narrowed focus, and when you do that breathing work, it helps expand, it helps release, and it brings more oxygen to your brain so you can think a little bit clearer, okay? I think feeling the fears is good, or else they turn into OCD type intense anxiety thoughts. Yeah, I find writing those out helps me externalize them, because once I actually speak those fears out, then I can see that they are false evidence appearing real, right? And also looking at, if the worst thing, like whatever the worst possible thing is that you can think of that could happen, and that happens, knowing what would be the next step. It's like pre-acceptance. Not that you're trying to manifest that or anything, don't get me wrong, that's not it. But it's a matter of, sometimes the fear is like, well, shit, if this doesn't happen, then what do I do? Right? So if you have some sort of plan in mind of like, you know what, if I fall flat on my face and I totally bomb this, what happens next? It's like, oh, I have to take the course over again. Okay, just that one? Or do you fail the whole semester? Do you die? Do your parents kick you out of the house? Like, do you not get your dream job? What is it? What is the consequence of the fear that you are concerned about? And when you are able to say, okay, let's assume the worst case scenario actually friggin' happens. Now what the hell do I do? And when you know what the next step would be afterwards, what it does is it removes the sting, the fear of, okay, if that worst thing happens, then I'm still okay. I know what I'm going to do next. It'll suck. It's not going to not suck, but at least you know what to do next, okay? So, and when you know what to do next, then you know it's not the end of the world. You didn't die, you're still here, and now you have a plan of what you need to do. So try those out, Ryan, and let me know how that works for you, and hopefully that helps with you. Okay. So, going back to defensiveness. Defensiveness, in order for this to happen, there has to be a power dynamic. Usually, you don't get defensive with somebody who's on equal level. And so, if somebody tells you something and they're on equal level, it's no different than, okay, your coworker comes in and goes, you shouldn't do that. And you're like, fuck off. It's like, especially if you don't really like them, you're like, I'm not listening to you. But your boss comes in, says the exact same thing. You're like, shit, okay, yeah, I got it. You do it. It's different because there's a power dynamic difference. Okay, so there is somebody who is in authority, and they have the ability to make your life hell if you do not follow through with whatever request that they are asking. So in the case of growing up in an abusive environment, when you're being criticized, they have the ability to make your life hell. You are, as a child, dependent on them for your safety, for your food, for your shelter, for your care. And when they criticize you, it is extremely threatening to receive that criticism, right? It doesn't take much for a child to feel threatened, right? Just look at any child as like where, the kid wants to go out the front door and you're like, no, we're leaving, bye. And you turn to go away and they're like, oh, no, no, no. The fear of abandonment comes in, right? So you don't want to do those kind of things. But there's a power dynamic. And whether that's in a childhood where you're reliant on your caregivers to be able to provide for you, and the fact that they're not happy with you becomes extremely threatening. And if they're not happy for a long period of time and it doesn't matter what you do, then you become desensitized to whatever criticisms that you're receiving, and you tend not to take action on those criticisms because it's like, there they go again. They're just off on something. So it ends up getting lumped in. You can't tell the difference between helpful criticism that you actually need to take action on, or if this is just one more thing added to the pile kind of thing. So keep that in mind, whichever way it's being dealt with, okay? So when somebody is receiving that criticism, like I said, it can be their past that is coming into play of why they're being defensive, and it has really not a whole lot going on with today. Still being patient, being understanding, walking them through that, reassuring them that you still think they do a good job, but we just need to fix this one thing kind of thing. And allow them space for their feelings, right? Because they may be processing feelings around it, and you might be getting upset. It's like, why are they getting so bent out of shape about this? If you know that you've done everything on your side, allow them the space for their feelings. It might be something from the past. Give them some time to work that stuff out. You don't have to call it out. You don't have to jump in and be a therapist or anything like that. But allow them the space for it. Trust that they'll work it out. Give them that reassurance. It's like, I have faith that you'll be able to figure this out, right? And if you have any better ideas, this is the way I think it should be corrected. But if you think of a better way, I'm open to that. And that kind of softens the sting of it a little bit, especially if you're dealing with somebody who's already defensive. Okay? Another thing that'll cause you to be defensive is your past experiences. If every time you got told that you talk too loud, and then you soften your voice, next thing you know, people are telling you that you're a low talker, and you're like, I can't win, right? So you end up behaving in certain ways, and it'll dictate your response. So then maybe you get your back up. You're just like, nothing I ever do is right. And that's a common thing that they say narcissists do. Why? Because narcissists were always criticized, and they have a different way of dealing with things. So, or those narcissistic tendencies, whatever it is, right? I think all of it stems from a particular wound, and then there's different paths that people go down to cope with. They either become become really defensive, or they go on the offensive and they start being the ones that are picking on other people, because as long as they're picking on other people, nobody's picking on them because everybody's too afraid to pick on them. So it can kind of go both ways. So either way, it's a fear reaction. And what is fear? Fear is false evidence appearing real. Everything is either a cry for or an expression of love. So when we focus and we operate from that perspective, and we've done our own inner work, we know how to manage and mitigate our own fears and deal with that, then we are better able to recognize when other people are acting out in certain ways that are not beneficial, and then we can help properly guide them. Okay? So, this brings us to the point of where you're in a leadership position, and I think feeling the fears is, okay, yeah, that was a comment from before. Okay. So when you're in a leadership position and you've given feedback, people aren't reacting, and then they say something that causes you to become defensive. They find a way under your armor and they stick it to you, and you're just like, oh. Now, what ends up happening is that ends up becoming a threat to you. You feel this loss of control. And then there's the need to fight back that kicks in. This happened in the work environment, one of the work environments I was in. I was a supervisor, and there was somebody who was very timid. I knew that she had a lot of abusive previous bosses. I did everything to try and reassure her that was not the case. I was supportive, like crazy supportive. So much so that like I'd go over things with her and she'd always thank me and she was appreciative of it. But after she like left my desk, it's like other people that were around listening going, oh my God, I was gonna kill her for you. How do you stay so patient? And I'd be like, because I could see she's just afraid, and if I help her get through the fear, then it's all good. She's capable of doing the job, and you have to come from a standpoint of knowing that people are capable of learning, and us as leaders, we have to find what is the missing piece. Because people want to do a good job. They want to perform well. They don't come in deliberately trying to screw things up. And if they are screwing things up, you can guarantee, especially if it's repetitive, then there's something connected with a past experience, past trauma that they've dealt with that's unresolved, it's unhealed. And this is why I talk about trauma and that it has to be addressed, because it does affect your business even if you've never been through trauma. Even if you think everybody's just a bunch of fucking snowflakes, it still does not help your business unless you actually do the work. You understand what's going on, and when you can lead from that perspective, then you can help your leads show the team what it is that they need to do, how they need to look at things, how they need to operate. Okay? But if you're in a leadership position and they manage to find their way and they got under your skin and they got you, and now you're defensive and now you're friggin' mad and now you want to go on the offensive, that usually stems from childhood as well. So it's the same wound, but the flip side of the coin, where it was criticism. Because what happens if you lose control, right? What happens, you know, the fact that you even have control, that control is important to you, tells me that you've been through a lot of criticism, that you were not supported properly, that you have been, and your way of dealing with the threat was to gain the control, keep the control. So anything that tries to take that control is intensely threatening, and then you become very punitive. How do I know this? Because that's what I did. So what had happened is I had to give some feedback. I had to give some critical feedback to this person. I softened it as much as I possibly could. She was still devastated by it. And So the problem with people who've been wounded like that, and then they get they're defensive, they're devastated. Now they feel justified in behaving badly and attacking back, and they will do sneaky, nasty things to attack back, and they'll feel completely justified in behaving that way. So this is why I also don't punish people that I see that they're doing deliberately manipulative, nasty things. I absolutely refuse to contribute to the fact that they are already in pain, because nobody who is healed and has done the work and is in a state of love would ever operate from that perspective. They would never ever do it. But we're all human and we're all fallible and we will all make mistakes. And I was one of them. So I went on the offensive. And because I felt she didn't appreciate all the work that I had put in, and all the patience that it took for me to walk her through everything. And then one small thing happens, and even when I was trying to be nice, she friggin' turned on me, and I felt justified at sticking it back to her. So then I was like, okay, you want to play like that? Fine, I'm going to be critical. I'm no more Mrs. Nice Guy. I'm just going to friggin' give it to you. And I did. And of course, that destroyed the relationship. It also made me look like an ass at the time. I was a younger supervisor at the time. But, you know, that's how I learned from it, because it really didn't do any good. And it wasn't until I dealt with my fear, I felt like I was going to be viewed badly, that I would be perceived as losing control. Felix, not now. No. No. All right. So, had to get my mom voice out there. So, because of that, I actually behaved badly. And then I felt a lot of shame afterwards, because I knew that I would never tolerate that kind of behavior. That's not who I like to operate as, but I did slip down that slope. And so I made amends, I did the right thing, and I took accountability for how I was behaving. And I also stopped attacking, because the problem that we have to remember is, if we're in a leadership position and we decide or we become defensive and we feel that it's okay to attack back, that's where we run into problems, and that harms the business as well, because even if anybody else sees you attacking that other person, even if it's justified, the tendency is that they would stick up for the person being attacked, and you lose respect. So it's never good to be the one, especially if you're in a leadership position, or if you're wanting to get into a leadership position, to be the one who is attacking. Never do that, because that means you're operating and you're leading from a place of fear. You haven't dealt with your fears. So pulling back, understanding what is going on with our own emotions, really digging into, why did I get my back up about that? What is it about that thing that person did that pissed me off? Because oftentimes it doesn't, it's like, well, I'm not afraid, I'm just pissed off. They didn't do the fucking thing that they were supposed to do, you know. Sorry, my transport side's coming out here. And that's how people talked in transport. That's, you know, not always out in the main office, but I was privy to some higher up, behind the closed doors kind of things, and where you kind of let things out a little bit and you vent some of the frustrations, because let's face it, sometimes running a business is challenging work and it's frustrating, and sometimes you have to vent just so that you don't lose it, right? So, but that being said, it's like, okay, when you sense that anger, and that's why we did that exercise of going through, what does that defensiveness feel like in your body? Where is the tension in your body? Is your breathing shallow? Are you clenched up? Does it feel like your blood's boiling? Any of those kind of things, and getting yourself to calm down, look at your own fears, figure out where they're coming from. When you deal with that, all of a sudden, this issue that you're dealing with isn't as big an issue. and you can deal with it more calmly and more logically. Because at the end of the day, if you have taken on a leadership role, or you're a business owner, or you're an entrepreneur, you know that you could control your temper if that was a customer that was going to pay you. You know you wouldn't be lashing out. If you knew that this was something, that it was a deal that was riding on, that would make a big difference in the company, you have the ability to control that anger. Often what happens though is shit rolls downhill, and what happens is we feel justified because that person's in a lower position of authority, and that's why the power dynamic is off. And it's very dangerous when the leader gets defensive. Okay? This is holding you to a much higher level of accountability, that we have to do this work. And it really sucks sometimes, because it's like being the older sibling. It's like, why does the younger one always get away with it? The little angels, they never have to do anything. Yeah, you took a leadership position as a servant. You are here to serve. You are here to guide the way. You can't guide the way. People won't want to follow you if you're throwing rocks at them. You cannot do that. So we have to take accountability, even if you're just like, oh my God, I'm going to lose my shit. Lose out with somebody, like, talk your fears out, write them out, whatever you have to do. You're entitled to your feelings as well, but you just cannot do them. You cannot disseminate them outward or downward, okay? You have to have a safer place, preferably somebody that maybe understands the business but is outside of the business. That is something where you can vent your frustrations, you could talk about how you're feeling without fear of it damaging the business. This is where having a coach, having somebody that you can talk to in a safe place would really, really help. Okay? And it all comes back to understanding why you took on that role of business owner, leader, any of that kind of stuff. Oftentimes it's because it comes from a good place. We aren't taking it mostly for power or anything like that, although you probably tend to want more control, which is why you're in that position, which also means that you've experienced a lot of criticism, which is why you want the control. So it's very important that you do some sort of inner work so that you do not go on the offensive with the very people that you are serving. Okay? And great business is the act of being willing to serve and help people find people that need the solution that you're actually offering. And you can't do that if you are treating your team badly. You can't do that because that will affect how they treat your customers and how they treat other employees and all that kind of stuff. So it has a trickle-down effect, and that you cannot continue to operate from that way. So this is why, especially for leaders, it's important to do that inner work. Okay? It's also important to recognize where people are on their journey. So as you do the inner work, you're going to want to try and reveal all the secrets and just tell them, look at this and do this, right? But sometimes people are not ready to hear that kind of stuff, and that's okay. We call that they're in denial. They don't know that they need this particular solution, and oftentimes what ends up happening, you could try to bring things up to people when they're in denial, but they often don't hear it, right? They don't take heed of it. And if you try to rip that cloak of denial off of somebody, then it's very painful for them. So this has to be done gradual. It has to be done in stages. And if you think of things like, I don't know if some of you guys are in the US, but up in Canada here, back when they were trying to ban smoking and try to deter people from wanting to smoke, is they did a marketing campaign where they put pictures of different ailments that can happen to you if you are a smoker. So the bad, ugly teeth, lung cancer, they showed like pictures that were on the packaging to deter that. But again, that is a fear-motivated um, uh, tactic to try and deter people from doing this, like to wake up to the dangers of smoking, right? And what ends up happening is the law of diminishing returns. So at first, people were like, oh, grossed out, and like they saw all the pictures. It's like, oh, I really hate this one. Yeah, the carrot and the stick analogy, exactly, Mark. So you can do that, but you end up, you expend so much energy, and it ends up having a desensitizing effect. No different than like when I was a kid, and the first time I ever watched a horror movie. It was Friday the 13th. I went over to a friend's place. We're all in the basement. It was dark, and we're watching Friday the 13th. And of course, the guys thought it would be fun to rewind the part where the girl gets axed in the head over and over. They kept rewinding it and going everything. And then I ended up, you know, at first it was horrifying because that's the first time I ever saw anything like that. And then it became, it's no big deal, right? And now if you look at the horror movies back in like the 80s or any older, like even a few years ago, you look at some of those horror movies, they're cheesy, right? But at the time they were gruesome, right? But it ends up becoming law of diminishing returns. It's like, it's no big deal, right? And then sometimes it ends up going over the top, and it's like, geez, what'd they spend on the fake blood budget for that movie? So you don't want to deal with denial, with fear. The best way is by leading by example, of showing and sharing and connecting with people by sharing what you've been through. Just like I shared the time that I did not behave well and I treated one of my team punitively because she got me, right? She got me. She got under my skin. I got defensive. I went on the offense as a leader, which was not a good thing. I never did that again afterwards. So it's okay to make the mistake, learn from it, adapt, and move on. Okay? Yeah, show that you understand people by describing their situation, how they're feeling, better than they can articulate themselves. So if you've done the inner work, you know how to describe what it feels like in your body. You know how to describe what it feels like to be called into your boss's office and you know they're not happy with you. So if you know what that feels like, you can preemptively address that and let people know. It's like, hey, we need to talk about this. Don't worry, we're going to get through this together, but this is something that needs to be addressed. So offering that support, that understanding, I've been where you're at and I'm going to help you through this, right? Instead of, you're on your own, you fucking correct this or you're out. That is a fear tactic. They're just going to be more afraid, and depending on how they react or how many times they've been criticized for something, they may get defensive, they may not be responsive. The whole point that you have to remember is to solve the problem, not to be right. You can be right or you can be happy, you can't be both. Just like I talked about in the beginning, right? Connect with people, human to human. Putting yourself in their shoes, what would that feel like? Oftentimes when we're so under pressure as a leader, it's like, I don't give a shit. Their problems are like friggin' minuscule to the shit I have to deal with. I have all these things on the go. If you don't care about their problems, why should they care about yours? They don't care that you have 100,000 problems, 1 billion problems. They don't care. You didn't care about the one thing that mattered to them. So if you want them to be caring and understanding for what it is that you're going through, what you're having to deal with, leaders have to go first. Leaders have to show the way. They have to care about the stuff that they don't actually care about. They're like, all the things I have to deal with. I get it, I know. But it's worth that investment, that small investment of time, because if you don't, then they go back, they're dejected. It's another example of criticism, and if they have a past of always being criticized, then they feel defeated. Now they're not performing the way that they need to perform, and you will not see the results of that until a couple of months down the line. And now you've had a couple of months worth of unproductive activity because they didn't feel supported. I'm not saying that you're to blame for all of their behaviors and all of that kind of stuff. It's just being aware that these dynamics can come into play, and they are not visible until they're a real problem. Okay? So being aware of these things allows you to preemptively deal with them where they don't become a huge problem, that you can kind of nip these things in the bud and deal with them while they're small, and create a culture where it's normal to be able to talk about this stuff. This could be the very first example that anybody's ever seen where they can receive critical feedback and it's not the end of the world, like what they grew up in. That they're not going to be punished, or they're not going to be thrown away or discarded or treated badly. That it's not them, who they are, and helping them desensitize from that, that it's not you, it's this particular task, this thing that needs to be focused on to get to where we need to go. Being able to reassure somebody of that is really important to get them to do what it is that you need to do. And at the end of the day, it's all about persuasion. So you have to have that flexible, adaptable, dance-like approach to it, that sometimes you go a little bit too much to the left and sometimes it's a little bit too much to the right, but you need to find that flow and not step on the toes of others, because if you step on your dance partner's toes, they retaliate, right? Step on the toes of others and they will retaliate. So, yeah. And when you reassure somebody of, and you can share some sort of personal story that you've been in the same situation that they've been in, and reassure them that they can get through this. I've done this all the time. Don't worry, it's not that big of a deal. I know you can fix this. I know we can figure this out. But the problem is, it's hard to do this in real time because we're under so much pressure. There's so many different things on the go, and it's so easy to slip into the addiction of ruling with fear. And that will cost you in the long run. So don't do it. Okay? Be aware of it, mitigate, and deal with your own emotions. When you do that repetitively, and you teach your team to do this as well, that the fears are just false evidence appearing real, and if we all band together, we can figure this out together, we'll find a solution, right? It's too easy to slip into old behaviors of just, I don't care how you feel, just get it fucking done. And there's times that that needs to happen just for the business to run. Make sure you go back and deal with the feelings afterwards. So that it's like, hey guys, I know it was a crisis moment. We needed to get that done. I so appreciate you guys for stepping up to the plate. We got this done. There were a few things that kind of fell through the cracks and we need to tighten up for next time, but you guys did an amazing job. I'm so proud of you for showing up, for doing the things that we need done. And I couldn't have done it without you. That is going to go so much further than you just moving on to the next thing. And it's like, okay, the next time you come out and you're hammering down and go, we just need to get it done, just push, push, push. All of a sudden, they're not reacting anymore. And that's not a good thing. And then what ends up happening is unknowingly, you've become the abuser. And you don't want that. And you've created toxicity in your work environment. And that's not a good thing. So this is why when I look at the whole spectrum of abuse and everything, everybody is just trying to do the best they can. Sometimes people have very maladaptive tools that they are using the wrong tool. They haven't been taught that there's another way. So if you see people behaving badly, just know that they haven't been taught another way. Doesn't mean you allow them to walk all over you. You have to have some firm boundaries in there. But you can guide them through your own example and through showing them that there is an easier way. The only reason that they're defaulting to that way of behaving is because they think that that is going to get them results. If they see that there is a better way, by human nature, we all tend to be a little bit I think it's the law of entropy. We'll go for the path of least resistance. It's like, oh, if that actually is an easier way, then, and it's going to give me the long-term results, and maybe it's slower at first, but I can definitely get there, then yeah, I'm going to do that. And being open to new ideas is really important as well, right? So, and when we can manage our own fears, we can deal with, because like I said, if you are wanting to have that tightness, that control, and you don't want to let go of that control, it's because of the criticism that you probably received growing up. And your way of coping with it is to seize control of everything and be the top dominant one, because then nobody can touch you, right? It's great out in the wildlife if you're in a battle, but not so great in a team that you're trying to grow a business with. Okay, so I hope this was helpful, guys, and I hope this gave you some insight on how reasons why people become defensive, how this ties into trauma, you know, even if you haven't experienced trauma, and how you can end up accidentally creating toxic work environments, not really intending to, but everybody's just trying to do the best they can. Okay, so guys, thank you, Mark. I appreciate the feedback, and I hope this was helpful. So guys, if you came in late and you're just catching the tail end of the recording, it will be up on my YouTube channel, which is Coach Tina B 125. You can look at all the replays there. You'll also see the artwork that I do as part of my art therapy posted as the thumbnails. There will be links and little inspirational quotes to help guide you. And you can purchase the prints or merchandise of the artwork on Redbubble. Okay? Thanks, guys. Hope you have a great night, and we'll see you again tomorrow night, 9 p.m. Eastern. Take care. Bye.